What's up guys? Welcome to AnimeKouhai. If you'd like to help me out, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel.
Wait a minute. Why am I the moral support of the people? Please don't say stuff like that. Come on,
he shouted, giving me some serious side-eye. Oops, he really did just say that in front of everyone. For some reason, Gadra was staring at the two of us during our little exchange. Something must have been on his mind, so I decided I would ask him after the conference. And last but not least, our collaborators, Veldora and Ramirez. Beretta, Trainee-san, and Cherries were also on standby in the corner of the room. There we go, that's everyone. I gently stroked Ranga sitting next to me and looked around at everyone in their seats.
I suppose it comes as no surprise why I gathered you all here today. We must discuss our strategy against the Empire. Benimaru and I came up with the outline of the plan. But I would also like to know what everyone else here thinks. Please express your thoughts freely.
Yes, sir.
Everyone answered in chorus, kicking off the conference. Looking at the screen, you could see vast numbers of Imperial soldiers lining up one after another. Visible beside them were also large hunks of steel, rolling with continuous tracks wrapped around their wheels as they sputtered in loud bursts. Those were tanks. Going off of what we saw from our bird's eye view, they appeared to have 2,000 of them.
Wait, why do they have tanks?
I called out, unable to believe my eyes. I hurriedly asked Shinji and the others and found out that the Empire was pushing for the development of modern weapons using the Otherworld's knowledge, science and technology. Instead of gas, it had an internal combustion engine running on magicules. These were supplied by the constant intake of outside air, which had the added benefit of not only harvesting magicules from the environment, but also served to cool the hot engine. This tank was highly versatile, and in terms of its performance alone, it easily outperformed the best tanks in my previous world. Gadra said that they analyzed the magic-controlled power reactor they had excavated from ancient ruins and modernized it. Also, magic stones could be used to fuel it. During normal operation, it gathered magicules from its environment. But for combat, magic stones were used. This was an all-terrain vehicle fit for even the roughest roads, reaching a top speed over 100 km per hour. Although coming at a great energy cost, it even had the ability to float a short distance above the ground. I felt like I was late to the party and frustrated about the fact that I didn't make them myself. The idea of a tank in this world of knights never occurred to me. We had built a train, meaning we were this close to making tanks too. But we didn't have cars, either, so skipping straight to tanks would have been weird. I always thought that it would be a shame to popularize the use of cars too. They were convenient, but equally dangerous, you know what I mean? Everyone would clamor to get one, but in the end, it would be impossible to ever meet demand. Resource scarcity was still a thing here, so the split between haves and have-nots was inevitable. In my opinion, using trains in urban environments was more convenient than cars. Then once everything was up and running with the trains, I wanted to invent luxurious cars for the rich. They were meant to be something people could strive for, as the ultimate status symbol. Well, that would have to wait until after the war. After all, their tanks weren't the only thing of note. They also had ships that flew in the sky. Are you for real? I wanted to shout. Having that kind of thing would make transportation a piece of cake. They could single-handedly solve logistics problems when used for war. At that point, I realized that maybe I was getting too cocky. Perhaps I was being a bit optimistic when I assumed our air superiority. I had thought about developing that sort of thing as well, but dismissed it as impossible. One does not simply develop flying ships overnight. Given enough time, we maybe could have done it, but development wasn't that straightforward. It takes a lot of trial and error before a product is ready for practical use. So, we had to applaud the research and development team of the Empire. Those guys were brilliant. But I must admit that I had a slight desire to capture at least one ship whole. Had I tried to think more outside the box and been a tad more liberal in my demands, we could have been sitting here with our very own, you know what? Forget it. There was no use crying over spilled milk. It was something to think about for the future. After the war ended, I would try and develop a lot more things on a whim. The situation with the Empire was as I just saw. It was nothing new to me, but for some of the people here, this was their first time seeing anything of the sort. They just stared at the screen dumbfounded, unable to hide their astonishment.
As far as estimates go, we could be dealing with 1 million invaders in total. Well, it's already evident as we can see. I know you may have been surprised by their weapons, but that doesn't change the fact that we have the upper hand. Don't worry.
The most important part of war is to know how strong the opponent would be. At this point, we knew their abilities as if we'd proverbially stripped them naked. Raphael-san counted that the enemy troops numbered 1 million soldiers in total. Now that may sound like a crazy number, but it was still unlikely for our side to lose. That was how strong our side was.
Gadra told me that there are 3 major corps in the Empire.
I said.
One of them, which is called the Armored Corps, has the tank troops that were shown on the screen. They call it the Magic Tank Division, and it is undoubtedly the main force of the enemy.
Then, I went into further detail about the inside information I had on the tank division. That's not all the intel Gadra gave me. He also attended the strategy meeting and told me everything about it. They must have learned about Gadra's escape, so it was likely that they made changes in the plan that they had initially laid out in the meeting, but it was safe to assume that they didn't change the main gist of it. After all, Yuki was also there with the goal of starting a coup. He would definitely stir the other commanders up by insisting that they didn't have to be on guard as Gadra was already dead. Gadra also said that the Armored Corps commander Calgurio took the bait, hook, line, and sinker. He believed that the dungeon held treasures and was planning to beat the other commanders to the punch. If so, he would probably hate to make major changes to their plan, so he was likely to agree with Yuki's suggestion. It was dangerous to act on assumptions, but it was easy to guess the intent of their actions if you looked at how Calgurio was positioning his army. Gopta was the first to speak after I finished explaining.
About my army that is on standby in the in-town. Are we gonna fight against those tanks?
Gopta brought up a good point. In fact, from the point of view of the corps commander, this question had to be asked. It was a matter of life and death. Gopta, who would always sleep during meetings, had matured. Indeed, it was because people take responsibility that they.
Why are you asking such an obvious question?
Benimaru demanded, turning to Gopta while I was deeply moved.
The First Army will destroy their tank corps under your command.
I didn't know about that.
Gopta murmured in a daze, somewhat shocked. Well, I could totally understand where he was coming from.
Are we going to have to defend the in-town to the death?
He asked, with dread in his eyes.
Of course not.
I said with a smile.
From what I know about the tanks, you have a shot at beating them if you play your cards right. The only problem is that we don't know how many people would be hurt during the battle. To begin with, it's harder to defend than to attack, so the inexperienced green numbers will only serve as targets for the tanks. The plan isn't for you to fight till the bitter end.
I took my time explaining this to try and reassure him. Hakuro, who was in charge of supporting Gopta, could apparently sense what I was playing at from the onset. He just listened and agreed to what I said.
Then, what should we do?
The commander's role is to think about that, but it would be hard for a first-timer like you. Benimaru, explain it to him.
I said with an air of authority. Actually, like Gopta, I was no better than an amateur when it came to army stuff. I didn't know much about tactics, so I just let Benimaru do the finer details. But my approach of taking it easy and delegating stuff had many upsides. If Gopta managed to step up and worked hard, I would have even more time to slack off. We both listened to Benimaru's explanation, hoping that Gopta would do his best on this one.
Listen, Gopta, the in-town is important, but it doesn't matter if you lose it. If it gets destroyed, then we can just rebuild it. If it gets taken by the Empire, then we will just take it back. The problem is about the residents being hurt. However, Rimuru has already come up with a solution. We have issued an order to the residents there to evacuate to the capital Rimuru.
Yep. The moment we knew the Empire would make its move, we started evacuating the civilians. It was taking time, but it should be finished before the Imperial Army arrived.
Come to think of it, there aren't very many residents there.
Exactly. Your job is to safely evacuate the rest of them. Once you're done, go here.
Benimaru pointed at the huge map spread across the table, specifically, the central city of the armed nation of Dwargon.
Huh?
Look at this video. From what we can see, the Imperial Army is planning to divide its forces and invade along several routes. While some of them have already entered the Great Jura Forest, there was no movement in their tank troops. If you look at the direction these troops will be going, it's clear that they're planning to move along the foot of the Kanat Mountains. There aren't as many trees there, so it doesn't affect the advance of their army.
I see.
You don't get it, do you? Your goal is to defend the Dwarven Kingdom,
said Benimaru, as he placed a piece representing Gopta's army in front of the Dwarven Kingdom. Next, he took out a piece for the Dwarven army and placed it next to Gopta's.
It is a united front.
Oh.
Gopta gasped with surprise and excitement as it finally clicked. We had formed this military tactic based on Gadra's information and had already talked to Gazel about it. In accordance with our alliance, we told him that the Empire's aim was the Dwarven Kingdom. He also pledged to send reinforcements to our aid as he had promised. Naturally, Gazel also knew that the Empire was on the warpath. He said that he was tired of turning down their repeated requests for permission to march. But sooner or later, the Empire would run out of patience, he predicted. Gazel was happy with my offer, and it was of mutual benefit. We would abandon the in-town and later rebuild it if it got destroyed. Though, if we didn't bring the battle to its doorstep, the Empire would probably spare it. It didn't really matter though, since we could always reconstruct it after the war ended.
The Empire is passing through a conspicuous route because they want us to know where they will attack from. Anyone would notice an army of that size marching.
Is that what you call a tour de force?
Datta, you little smartass, when did you learn such fancy expressions? So this bastard did do his studies, I was somewhat impressed.
Right.
Benimaru continued.
This route falls right on the border between Dwargon and Tempest. Both countries will definitely notice them, and it's their way to easily gauge the other's reaction. If we carelessly provoke them, they would use it as an excuse to start the war immediately. However, since it is strictly forbidden for us to attack them first, we will start with a warning. Do you follow?
Yes.
If we don't make a move on them, the Imperial Army will cross the Emerald River and take the high ground outside of the entrance to the Dwarven Kingdom. It's a great place for them to deploy their army since it's flat and doesn't have many trees.
I see.
If they end up doing this, Gazel won't sit by and wait. He's going to send his troops out and start negotiating with the other side. It's the same for us, and the Empire will have both Tempest and Dwargon as their enemies.
Benimaru moved the pieces on the map, complementing his explanation with a visual demonstration of the plan.
According to Gadra Dono, the Empire was wary of a pincer attack from both our armies. As long as they hold that place, though, that's not going to happen. After all, attempting to surprise an enemy who is waiting with open arms is tactical suicide.
The point of a surprise attack was to catch the opponent with their pants down. But if they anticipated our plan, not only would our advantage be moot, we'd be walking into a trap.
That's why we'll let them attack us, and then crush their army head-on.
Benimaru said, slamming Gopta's piece into the Empire's.
Oh.
Gopta was impressed. The other officers didn't seem to have any complaints, but I wonder what they thought about the difference in fighting power between Gopta's army and the Empire's.
Gabble, the Third Army's commander.
Yes.
Your duty is to guard the evacuating civilians. Watch them from the sky and look out for people who are falling behind or need help.
Understood.
Once everyone's evacuated, move on to aid Gopta straight away. If the timing is right, you two can meet before the Imperial Army arrives.
My corps prides itself on being the fastest in Tempest. We will make it on time.
Gabble replied confidently to Benimaru.
That's it for this video, guys. Thank you for always watching my videos and supporting my channel. Shout out to the new members of AnimeKouhai supporters: Quilly Buckner, Max Oriel, RN Bart, Little95, Coyote de Peza, Enrique Soto, Omar, Jane Apthic, TYI. This is not my username. Thank you so much for helping out. I'll see you guys in the next video.